Good morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Metal Meltdown. Today we are talking about Hiss, a brand new studio album from Singaporean grindcore and extreme metal crew, Wormrot. You know what I'm just realizing too? We haven't actually talked about a lot of grindcore this year. I mean, it's been a lot of black metal, a lot of death metal, a lot of prog metal, a lot of avant-garde stuff. And we've talked about a lot of all that, but not a lot of grindcore. In fact, the only grindcore release I can remember reviewing off the top of my head from this year is that new Napalm Death EP mini album that came out back in February. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's plenty of stuff brewing in the underground, but I feel like I should have heard and seen more by this point in 2022. Well, I may not have heard a lot of grindcore in 2022, but I'll tell you this much. I'm not sure it'll matter what else I hear grind-wise this year, because I doubt it can top what I'm hearing on Hiss, the fourth studio album from these Singaporean grind masters who, while not as prolific as the aforementioned Napalm Death or even another band like Pig Destroyer, I honestly would hold them in that same regard. I mean, their last two studio albums, Dirges and Voices respectively, are fucking fantastic, and they've done a slew of EPs and splits and demos that I've also thoroughly enjoyed. But as much as I have enjoyed all of that material and content, I think I find myself enjoying Hiss significantly more. It's tighter, it's darker, it's meaner, it's more ambitious and more provocative in a lot of aspects, lyrically, musically, atmospherically. Opening track The Darkest Burden, for instance, kind of plays with your expectations and low-key fucks with your patience by opening on 30 seconds of complete fucking silence. Right before the 30-second mark, I was beginning to wonder if there was something wrong with my speakers, so I started fucking around with some cables. I turned the volume way up, and then, as a result, when the track officially kick-started, I was hit in the face with this absolutely carnivorous and twisted grind nonsense. It's manic, it's bloodthirsty, it's got kind of a blackened death metal underbelly to it, which I think is pretty cool. Earache is ranting and raving like a fucking lunatic at Arkham Asylum, adding to the intensity of it all. The transition from The Darkest Burden into the following track, Broken Maze, is honestly fucking remarkable. If you told me these two tracks were actually one, I might have believed you. I mean, it was just so smooth and so seamless. It very wisely builds on the momentum, but it also makes some room for some more atmospheric, ominous, howled, choir-like vocals, very reminiscent of some stuff I might have heard from Napalm Death on more modern records like Utilitarian and Apex Predator Easy Meat, which itself is emboldened by this very brutal, almost kind of thrashy breakdown. I mean, right around the 1 minute, 20-second mark, there is some razor-sharp, neck-snapping riffage and percussion that would not be out of place on a really savage underground thrash metal record. Then there's When Talking Fails, It's Time for Violence, which just feels like an explosive Molotov cocktail of politically charged grind and crossover thrash and classic hardcore. It's a pretty chaotic, messy, violent, crazed track for sure, but it's anchored by a really simplistic but effective hook that emphasizes some classic punky bass tones and throttling beats and some gang vocals. It feels like a full-on riot in sonic form. When I hear this track, I want to go throw a fucking brick through somebody's window, man. And then there's tracks like Your Dystopian Hell and Grieve, which are significantly more miserable. They're very bleak and eerie and stark. I mean, the other tracks we've talked about, and a lot of tracks on this album, they're not exactly, fun and joyful per se, but they are most certainly a pleasant walk through the park in comparison to some of what I'm hearing on these tracks. Your Dystopian Hell, for instance, feels kind of poignant considering the subject matter, not to mention it's got some more, black and death metal spice and flavor that makes it just feel really dark and brutal. It's a genuinely somewhat anguished and angular track, as is Grieve, which is also probably the best song on the record, and one of the best songs that Wormrot have ever given us. It's just such an unnerving and unpredictable track. lashing out violently, emotionally, and very frequently with these blackened grind flurries of madness. In place of vocals on this track, you also have violin and some string arrangements, which just kind of adds to the very uneasy and awkward and anguished feeling. It's definitely a wild cut. Despite its grindcore bass, this feels more akin to something I might expect from Gorguts or Artificial Brain or Imperial Triumphant or some other kind of avant-garde technical death metal crew. String arrangements pop up again on the closing track Glass Shards, which similarly feels very weird and messy and deranged and kind of spooky. It also ends the album in surprisingly very dramatic and cathartic fashion. Preceding Glass Shards, you also have the very slimy, slow-moving, intentionally monotonous All Will Wither. The weirder kind of vocal textures and patterns here makes this feel genuinely, strange. If a human being approached me in real life making these noises, I would assume that they are very mentally ill and they intend to do me harm. And believe it or not, folks, we've really only scratched the surface of Hiss. There's a lot of stuff on this record. There's 21 songs in total, and each song brings its own unique ideas and flavors and spices, and as such, each song feels unique and distinct. Desolate Voices, for instance, has the emotional urgency of, a Fuck the Facts style grindcore song, but also with, kind of a blackened post-metal black gaze underbelly. And then there's Voiceless Choir, which starts off as a pretty standard kind of grindcore number, but near the end turns into this raging piece of Municipal Waste-style crossover thrash debauchery. The band themselves have a lot of energy, a lot of hunger, a lot of passion. Earache sounds amazing on vocals throughout this. It's genuinely disappointing to learn that this will be his final album with Wormrot, but hey, he went out with a motherfucking bang. The production keeps everything very tight, very balanced, very visible. There's not an ounce of fat or filler to be found on this thing. Honestly, I'm going with a 4.5 out of 5. I may not have heard a lot of grindcore in 2022, but it doesn't matter what comes up grind-wise after this. It will not top this. This is the best grindcore album of 2022. If you love grind and you love everything I've said so far, you need to check this out ASAP. It's rare that I find something as dark and as simultaneously colorful as this. I mean, there's a lot going on, but it's still such a brutal fucking listen. If you're brand new to grind, this would actually be a really interesting record to check out because there is so much going on here, and Wormrot really are one of the best grind bands out there. I've no idea what the band plans to do in the future without Earache, and I've no idea if Earache has any plans to continue with any other kind of band or project, or maybe as a solo artist, but whatever the future holds, I'm happy these two were able to put out one more album together. I'm happy these two worlds were able to collide one final time because it has resulted in something pretty fucking spectacular. Once again, 4.5 out of 5. Wormrot's best album yet, one of the best grind records of the year. A lot of people are saying it's an album of the year contender in general. I've seen it on social media, on Discord and all that. I don't know if I'm there just yet, but we'll see. I could honestly picture this being an honorable mention. I mean, it really is just an incredible fucking record. Go check it out. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be, so what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? And thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe right here so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.